don't eat as we go.
We're rolling. Yes. And we've made it to what I'm most excited about is the fish episode. I knew it would not take us very long to share a meal over fish. We're a divided house, though. We're a divided table. We've got half the table is this raw stuff, this sushi, and the other half is this nice crispy beer battered
there we go, man.
Cod.
That's right.
Oh my goodness, it's so good. Yeah, but shout out to Izumi and to BB Runers in Salem. They're not sponsoring this. This was purchased. We wanted to have a meal with fish because we had to debate in episode number 1 about fish. But this is table talk. So this meal comes out of episode 1 where we're talking about meals in the Bible. And a lot of our talk had to do with like when Jesus raises from the dead and he's having conversation with his disciples and he appears to them, he's making fish for breakfast. Donnie thinks that it's sushi. Brian and I think that he obviously beer battered it. Who knows? We will never know.
There's a fire involved. We know this from
there
Scripture.
is a fire.
There is a fire involved.
I will withhold hateful words for all people on the other side. It's fine.
But today, what we're tackling is we're in the middle. How many weeks are we into this parable series? We're like
7 or 8 at this point.
7 or 8 of 13. So if you've held on and if you've been coming for the parable series this long, you've been coming to church for way too long.
But to be fair, I've heard a lot of people say, hey, you guys are bringing stuff out of the parables that we've never heard. Even had somebody this morning at one of our other groups was basically saying, hey, I've heard this parable my whole life. And that was the goal behind it is, hey, how do we go a little beyond the Sunday school story? It's the same as when we did Old Testament stories, great stories that, you often hear them as Sunday school stories and then you never hear them again.
Yeah.
And then people go, but there's so much in there that we didn't realize.
Yeah.
So I think
because a lot of them they can all be read the same way, but not all of them are received the same way. And that's actually one of the questions I had for us. So one of the things that I thought about for this parable series, we're going to talk about parables for just a couple weeks. So we're not tackling each parable as it happens, like sermon by sermon and talking about those, just parables in general and kind of doing a little bit of like thematic hopping back and forth between different things. But something that I thought about, and this kind of came up when I was one of the ones that preached the first week, so on the sower. But one of the things that I thought about was I am certain that people are listening and watching and thinking, I wonder if there is a parable that has ever given Sheldon or Brian or Donnie or Billy just maybe not struggle to understand, but struggle to practically live out. I tell people all the time, as communicators, always before a sermon preaches to the congregation, it preaches to the communicator. Yeah. And parables have this way, I think, more than any of the other sermon series maybe that we've done so far. They've had this way in my heart to kind of like, hey, like you've got to wrestle with something, Billy, in this before it gets communicated to anybody else. So the question is, I know it's a long story long. The question is, has there been a particular parable that you can remember in the past or in this series that when you were preparing it, it struck you in a way that you were like, I'm not actually sure that I'm ready to preach this parable because not maybe necessarily an understanding thing, but it's just like, this is a tough one to, for me, I thank goodness am not preaching the parable of the Good Samaritan. Right before we recorded this podcast episode, Sheldon preached the online sermon for the Good Samaritan. And that is one that when I read it, it's like, it reads great. But when you try to live that and the parable owns you, it's like, this is tough. So what's a parable that you guys have maybe had a tough time in the past preaching it or preparing for it?
I think there's some parables that we just don't preach. Like we've again in a formation group that we're a part of, we I cheated a bit, and I was like, hey, what are some of your favorite parables? Because you wrote some questions. So I was like, oh, this is easy. And a lot of people, they like the lost parables, the sheep and the coins and stuff, because they're like, we feel lost. But the one for me that came up as well, and Reba mentioned it, was the parable of the 10 virgins, which is Matthew 25. One thing that I had never actually seen before was it's an apocalypse, it's a future tense parable. It's not the kingdom of heaven is like, it will be like.
It will be like.
Which I was like, oh, I hadn't really seen that before. It also is one where we use, it's a play on some Hebrew words, young woman, virgin, ready for covenant is really, the history there. And then it's kind of this real sharp ending of the doors are shut and they're gone. And it's all about preparedness, but it's the weirdest way. And we preached the sermon on our dedication, celebration, family Sunday.
Yes.
So we should have been like, some poor kid being like, Mommy, what's a virgin? Just ask your parents. And I'm sorry about that.
Your father.
Ask your dad. But that was one that really struck me very, very differently than it had before, because we think it's a very simple, easy parable of, okay, 5 are ready, 5 are not. It's this dichotomy of the two groups, one that's kingdom, the one that's not. But it was actually very, very powerful, especially since I have 2 daughters, since I live in that world. And what does it mean to anticipate covenant, to be ready for? And the parable kind of takes a twist in a way that I didn't expect it to, even though I've read it a ton of times.
Yeah.
I mean, mine, when I was growing up, and I mentioned this at our group this morning too. It's funny, just kind of thinking about things. I grew up in a neighborhood. We didn't have the smartphones and the TVs. We had them, but we just didn't use them like we do today in today's day and age. And so a lot of times we were out riding bikes.
This is way before your time.
Yes.
All right.
In the early 1900s.
Back when I went to grade school with Moses.
No way.
So we used to ride our bikes around all the time. We were always outside. We were at the playground. We were, the way you knew where everybody was is you just looked for the house where all the bikes were out front. Right. You knew everybody was inside that house. But I remember they were doing construction behind our development. And so we'd go back there and we'd play in the unfinished houses. And, it's a lawsuit today if you're doing something like that. But we would always kind of dig in the holes in the dirt out there because we thought to ourselves, man, we got to find something cool out here in the dirt, and we can play with it and stuff like that. So the parable of finding the treasure in the field was always kind of appealing to me, because it's like, you're an archaeologist or you're Indiana Jones out there and you're hunting for this lost treasure. And then the pearl of great price is kind of really attached to that in this juxtaposition idea, like we're talking about through this parable series. But to me, when I sat down to really dive into this parable and prepare it, I had always looked at it as like, well, I'm the guy that finds the treasure in the field, and treasure's Jesus. I'm the guy that goes out for this pearl of great price, and this is fantastic. This is what you do, But then I never really saw in there until I really dove into the scripture that actually, no, it's God is the one who goes out. God is the one who gives up everything to find us as the treasure, and really, really what that means for me personally is God pursues me. God goes after me. It's a lot like the prodigal son and what happens in that parable as well.
Yeah, for me, this might be recency bias, but as the time of recording this, the parable of the talents, for me was a big one. Something that had come to mind recently in the week before. So I'd written the message, preached it online, then some time passes, and then you kind of come back to it, and you're looking at it. What are we going to add? What are we going to take out? How am I going to shift this for preaching it live? And something that kept coming to mind was this call to steward what has been poured out. What I mean by that, if you look in Ephesians 4:7, Paul mentions that Christ has given us grace as he apportioned it. So we've each been given a measure of grace. And that's kind of what the parable is pointing to. It's not pointing to financial stewardship or like
abilities
or like red pill podcaster. Don't waste your life. Wake up at 5 a.m. every day and go tackle. That's not what it's talking about at all. But it's stewarding the grace that you've been given And it's not about getting a return on an investment, but instead it's the effort that goes in. I think it's Dallas Willard who talks about it, that grace is not opposed to effort, it's opposed to earning. And so Jesus does call us to effort. It's not as if, well, I've raised my hand, I've checked the intellectual boxes about Jesus being the Son of God, the resurrection, virgin birth. I'm good. I don't need to do anything. If we read the Gospels, Jesus is saying, no. Do not be like that third servant who has a distorted view of God. Instead, it's about the effort moving beyond being Christian in name only. So for me, what confronted me was, am I stewarding the grace that has been given me? Am I stewarding what has been poured out? If you want to use the Joel passage from the Old Testament, that God pours out his spirit on his people, on the young, the old. Yeah. And am I stewarding that? And I think there's personal questions that go in with that, or formational journeys of where am I at? How am I not doing that? How am I doing that? So it was something that coming into Sunday, I'm like, oh boy, here we are.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Where have you guys seen parables that are not scripture, but in your life or in somebody else, like a story that taught a lesson that confronts you about the way that you view something? Maybe it was a coach trying to teach you something and had like a, hey, here's the story, or I'm trying to think of one from my own life, because you always ask the questions that you would also answer, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, I don't know if I even have an answer for this, but I'm curious if you guys have an answer for it. Because in youth ministry, when I was in youth ministry for several years, I always used to think, how could I prompt and encourage students to think about what objects or what things in their everyday life would they use to tell a story that really confronts us with the truth about the kingdom of heaven? Like, hey, here's a parable about DoorDash, or here's a parable about TikTok, and the TikTok user, like the influencer, has this choice or that choice. And then it's like, oh, like this is me and I have this choice. And this is I
got one.
Yes.
All right. So this is technically real history, but it almost, but here's the thing. It almost becomes this parable or story that we are forced to confront with, or to confront. So mid 1700s, modern day East Germany, right above Chechnya, just west of Poland, there's a small village called Herrnhut. Now, Herrnhut was purchased by a guy who was wealthy. His name is Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf. He was
Say
20
that 5 times fast.
Literally, he was 22 at the time, but came from wealth. And the idea that his family had this idea that he would take over the estate, he would begin to look after the family wealth, carry on the family line, those sorts of things. But deep within his being, he cared about the gospel going out to the nations. And there was this struggle in his family of, are you going to do that, or are you going to carry the family estate? He decides to do a little bit of both. So he does end up buying this estate from his grandparents. And all of a sudden, though, you have Christians coming from Eastern Europe who are being persecuted because there's a big Protestant Catholic divide, and they were being persecuted by the Catholic Church at the time. And they're coming in, and he decides that he's going to allow them to live on his land. And so they build this village called Herrnhut. Here's the problem. You have Presbyterians, you have Baptists, you have a group called the Moravians. You have all these people sitting within this same village, and they all have deep differences. Believers' baptism, baby baptism, all these different sort of issues. And so they come together, and he's 27 and he's leading this whole thing. They come together and they make a decision that they call it, like, I believe it was the brotherly agreement. They come together and they say, okay, we're going to live together and we're going to live by these things and focus on unity. Some years go by and it's not working out great. What they do is they decide, okay, we're not just going to live in agreement or unity or a fake version of unity without love. Instead, we're going to start praying together. And it led to this moment where this small village ended up having continuous prayer for 100 years. And it was a village of like 100 people. And this 100 people ended up leading missionary movements across the world. There's another guy that they say is like the father of modern missions, but it was really these like Moravians who were doing it in this little village to the point where John Wesley.
His name was also Ludwig.
well, then you have Then you have John Wesley who starts the Methodist movement, and he encountered these Moravians, and that's what sparked something within him that said, God is calling me to something deeper. So for me, the parable that I think of is actually history, but it's that this small group of people, of like a village of like a couple hundred, end up having this deep influence, which leads to the start of the Methodist movement, which leads to this history that we know about. Ludwig von Zinzendorf, who famously said, preach the gospel, die, be forgotten, in the most beautiful way. And it all started in this small thing. I think in our stream of church, we often think, oh, it's about who has the most money.
Yep.
I know the bigwigs over at this university. I know this corporate guy, and we have influence in our community. And that's how God's going to move. Or maybe it's 100 people in a small village who start to pray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you never know. And so I think that's the call to the parable within that, the revealing of the kingdom is that start seeking God. God will meet us. And God's going to do what God wants to do. And you never know, even after you're long gone, what that influence will be like. Just like what you mentioned with George Mueller.
Yeah, right.
With praying for your friends to come to faith. Like, you just don't know.
Did you just write a paper for your master's class?
I think he did. I think he did sitting here.
No.
That was awesome.
The example I was going to give is nowhere near that level. I was going to say something like the kingdom of heaven is like green eggs and ham.
Yes.
Like Dr. Seuss.
It is. Both can be true. Both can be true.
I guess that's kind of where I go sometimes is, as you read the Dr. Seuss books, they're so simple, but yet they're so profound in what they teach, and here's this guy.
Jesus, yes, I am.
Yes, I am.
Yours probably fits parable better.
Here's Sam I am, and he's like, the kingdom of heaven is like green eggs and ham, and this guy is like, I'm not going to touch it. I don't want anything to do with it. I won't eat it on a train or in the rain or, any of this stuff. And when he finally takes the step out, what happens? He discovers it's everything he ever wanted.
Oh, yeah.
I think you should hit up Phil Vischer because you just created the next version of VeggieTales.
Yes.
But yours is
But the main character's name will be Ludwig.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
It has to be now.
Yours is more parable, though. You win. You win if we're competing.
Ludwig von Wigglesdorf. Sorry,
Wigglesdorf,
Ludwig.
No, I think for me,
He's
kind of
rolling
mine's maybe a combo. Donnie will make fun of me, but one of the things that
Cornelius.
No.
Just to be
I was going
clear,
to say Nate Bargatze.
just to be clear, we will all make fun of you.
If you don't know, Sheldon will always mention
Please make
Nate
fun of
Bargatze
Sheldon in the comments.
and Acts 10.
And I'll always say at the end of the day,
Yes,
so you know,
time.
every single time. But what I like about Nate Bargatze's humor is that it's actually just real and it's every day, and there's nothing significant about it, and he doesn't have to. Did
you hear that, Nate? There is nothing significant about it.
I mean, it is the most, but I think that's why we love it the most, because it's simple and it's true and it's relatable. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to do with these things, because I think about the gospel is in the everyday. It's not in the big gestures. It's not in the cathedrals. It's what Donnie said. It's in the small things that happen every day.
Yeah.
I think about big characters in our world that everybody knows, like Mother Teresa. She didn't start out and go, how could I have a great, Twitter following?
Yep.
She just lived into a rule of her life, or she lived into a set of stories, and she made choices for herself that gained incredible momentum, and that people celebrated those stories. But I think it's when she comes on stage and in 79 wins a Nobel and obviously now has in the 70s version of attention. But I think about, even in my own culture, Nelson Mandela, there's very few people that don't know who that is. A guy that grows up very, very poor. His dad dies. He's adopted by a local tribal chief. He stands up for the rights of people. He's in prison for 27 years. He becomes president. He's all about redemption, which is his whole life. It's not an easy story, but
it's kind of a real life Joseph.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or even I think that this parables by default are, for the simplest term, the basement version is that they're stories. They're relatable stories that kind of we throw alongside life.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens in these things. And so you're saying, yes, here's this history lesson in a place that none of us probably even could point out on a map. that did something significant, but this was just, they weren't doing that to go, now one day 4 guys are going to sit around a table.
Yeah.
They're going to think I'm so cool.
Yeah,
Did
I
you
am.
know
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I knew
yeah.
Ludwig von Zinzendorf,
Hey, did you see me?
that's
Hey, did you see
the
me?
count for
Yeah.
this land? No.
Yeah, they didn't care about those things. They cared about living into the story of God, and I think that's what. And I think part of the indictment of parables is that they're so simple, and so most of them are so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that people try to argue with parables and not do them is part of the indictment of these people really don't want what God has.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing. I think humor can be parables. I think you know, like
Absolutely.
there's a lot of things that are. That's why I love the idea of I always tell on myself and tell the bad stories about my kids, and because it's real, and it's instead of presenting yourself as the hero, you're just a faithful servant.
Yep.
I mean, that's where I think parables have power.
Yeah. And what it actually makes me think about a little bit is some of the power that we've seen through like the reel-to-reels that we've done in the past. And I mean, some of them have hit differently than others. There's certain stories that people are drawn to and certain stories that people aren't drawn to.
What are you saying about Nacho Libre?
Listen. Well, leave your comments about Nacho Libre.
Leave them down. I want to read them.
Yes. No, but these just everyday stories that, like you said, they tell something that's relatable, and people don't just see themselves in the story, but they see themselves confronted by the same decision that these characters are confronted with. We become confronted with the same things, and some people are going to run toward those and want that, and some people aren't. It's just like when we started talking about the parable series in general, you always bring up, Sheldon, in the Old Testament, the parable that Nathan told to David,
Right.
that kind of catches him in his tracks, and he realizes like, oh, like I have just shown light, real light and exposure on like what I have done. And it starts this course of repentance and this journey to reconciliation. And yeah, a lot of people, they hear a story, they hear a parable, and they're confronted with something of themselves. Like most people don't want to. I'm convinced that most Christians, majority of most Christians that I think struggle to read Scripture, I think a vast majority of that demotivation or that lack of compelling to do it is they know what it's going to call them to, and they're not ready for it. So why
parables are not going
read
to call
it at
us
all?
to less.
No.
They're going to call us to more.
And most of the parables, there's only a small few that Jesus had to clarify to his disciples. But most of them, you either get it and you want that, or you get it and you are not ready for that. And it's kind of just like the rich young ruler, where it's like, give up everything that you have and follow me. And it's like, you either do or you don't.
Well, to your point, I think we want the parables to act as programs, meaning, well, this is just something you can add to your life that'll encourage your faith. And guess what? We can all have a potluck after, and it's going to be great.
Yeah. It's
Let's have a coloring page on this.
The fear part of that is that Jesus is actually going to ask you to upend your entire life.
Yeah.
Wipe it all clean and say, no. Now you're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
So it's something totally different. Not just, hey, your life's actually not too bad right now. You can just add a few things and you're actually pretty off into the races. Instead, it's a full read, like take it down to the studs.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fearful part of it when we approach the parables. But to your point, yeah.
I remember like 7 or 8 years ago. So this is in the middle of serving in middle school ministry here at Greenford. A Sunday morning, obviously, like all the other youth ministers, I'm giving all the youth ministers a bad name and a bad rep, because I show up on Sunday morning, I'm not prepared. I had to run a last minute errand to Walmart before coming back and then teaching the class. I cannot remember what I was going to Walmart for, but I do know that I went there, I got what I needed, and I came back. But the parable in the story, or the parable that I ignored, which is maybe a mixture of like, I preached the sermon of the great banquet, where like people, they didn't just have excuses. It was like, this is an excuse enough that really there's a refusal that's already there, and you just made up an excuse to kind of cover the refusal. But also the Good Samaritan. So I'm driving down Lisbon Road, get to Route 14, going to the Salem Walmart, and when I'm pulling into the entranceway, there is a woman holding up a sign that says, "I need money for diapers and gas." And what I hear the Spirit telling me internally is not stop and pay, not stop and provide. It's stop and ask. Like, what's your name? Like, you obviously have kids, you're in need, but like the prompting in my heart was relationally driven more so than it was like, this is somebody who's in need. So like stop and actually do something. And when I hear this, the parable of the Good Samaritan, like every time I'm reminded of that story, because I went into Walmart and was trying to talk myself into it, but then out of it, then into it, then out of it. And I came back out and she was still there and I drove away. And I remember getting back to church and feeling convicted, told the students, and the students were like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "You guys shut up." Like,
Yeah.
You stop it
and
right
I had
now.
a couple of them. They're just like, end the lesson right now, end early, and like go see if she's still there, like whatever. And I mean, the volunteers even in the room were like, "You should have called us and been like, something more important's come up. Like you can handle the game and the lesson." Long story long, after everything had happened, I drove back to Walmart. She wasn't on the corner anymore. So either she left and went to a different location or somebody helped her. I have no idea. But like even to this day, almost 10 years later, I'm still confronted with like, I don't look back and hold all this regret. I look back and now what I hold is I had a really good opportunity to be the hands and feet, and I missed that opportunity. So for me, it's not even as much guilt as it is God had an opportunity, and if I pass it over, that's not even something that now, oh, she'll never have a chance. God obviously I know that God probably orchestrated some other situation with somebody else to provide this Good Samaritan like provision for her, but it's just an opportunity that I missed. And the reason I ask us all of this is because I know people are sitting here listening and they're going, I don't just want the parables to confront me. I also want them to encourage me. And I think that we can be encouraged by all of the parables because when they do confront us over something that challenges us and makes us feel uncomfortable, we can be encouraged that every single one of us who's not Jesus feels that to some degree every single time. And that's not a bad thing. That's a Spirit is trying to reach deep inside of us to mold us and shape us more like Jesus. And you're not going to have one moment like I did, and you're not going to be exempt from like all the moments to be the Good Samaritan or to come to the seat at the banquet table, even though the parable is pretty clear. Like if you refuse, like the invitation's over. But Jesus all the time is very hyperbolic. Like, no, this invitation was serious, and like you refused it. Like, there's nothing better that you're going to find on any other table. Yeah. And it's a relationship with Him. So like, what things hold you back from that? But
Brian,
yeah,
what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, I think you're hitting on something amazing here because you're talking about this lady and, you said the Spirit's prompting you to ask. And I think a lot of times we've taken such a transactional view of the parables that we look at them and we're like, how do I step towards this? Or what do I need to do? Or what is this? And we make it all about ourselves when that's not what Jesus says. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like. And I think a lot of times we also get that individualistic perspective. We think it's all about the one, but it's not. It's about the kingdom. We all together make up the kingdom. It's more relational together. We're all building together as the church, as the kingdom, metaphorically, as Jesus is speaking. And so your call to be relational to this lady is the way that the Spirit is going to prompt us and what He's going to do in and through us. And it's not about, I messed up or, I feel guilty or, I feel shame for what I didn't do. No, the Spirit's going to give you another chance. You're going to have more opportunities to live and step into that. But it's about all of us collectively working together in relationship, not checking a box or saying, I didn't do it or I messed up today.
Well, and it's kind of funny because I remember, I've often asked people and said, will we ever get to a time that will end, world poverty or world, and the answer is no.
No.
I mean, Jesus tells us you're
Yeah.
always going to have the poor. I've always thought about it like this, almost like one day when you get up, get up somewhere. I'm going to assume that heaven has a theater room. Okay, so I'm just making an assumption, and then it'll play your life, not in the here's all the bad things that you wish we didn't keep record of, but it's almost like here's an image of my life going through life, and all the places that God was present that I didn't see. Like, and I'll be like, oh man, I totally missed it. Man, that one was so obvious. It was right. And I missed it. And God in his grace is not, I think we've gone the other way to say, God's going to give you one shot to get this right. And if you screw it up, then you're just, outside of the fold. But I imagine that I'm going to look at my life and God's going to say, these are all the opportunities and all the things and all the places that I gave you, or that I wanted to share myself with you, even for your good.
Right.
That we're going to look through and go, man, I missed like 98% of those. I just didn't even see them, or my eyes were so in my phone or in my own life or in my selfish spirit that there's going to be more people at Walmart needing diapers and gas. It's not like the eternal story of, well, you can't change it, so good luck at the judgment. But that's the way that I see things. There's so many opportunities for us to see and experience God. And that's why I think parables every day, whether you're interacting with your kids, whether you're having a meal, whether you're sitting with friends, there are moments that could impact our faith and the faith of others in profound ways. And most of them we miss.
Yeah.
Well, the ancient Celtic Christians used to call those thin places.
Yeah.
And the way we often think of thin places is the worship night when the chorus hits after the bridge or whatever it might be. And you're like, yes. And the lights are shining down and you're like, this is where God is. Absolutely. But also the thin places are the lady who needs diapers.
Yep.
The man on the side of the road.
That place when you go, what do I do? That's a thin place.
Yes, it is.
It's almost as if we need to pray with our eyes, meaning as you're going about your day in the daily and you're looking for where God is at work. It's not as if you're actively like, God, show me. But instead you're just, it's that openness of just being able to see what does that look like.
There's a guy that has a YouTube channel, and I only know this because my kids usually before a meal or right before we're like kind of winding down for something, we'll do a little bit of like watch some YouTube time. And the one thing that Carson always points up and he wants to like watch, because it's always about like cars or something. But this one channel that we came across was a guy. The channel is called The Roadside Tech. But this guy, the same principle is the one guy that's in the Midwest that goes around and like takes care of everybody's landscaping for free, and he has like millions of views and millions of followers. I mean, so he does everything that he does for free, and he's having a huge impact. But still, like there's a way for him to resource like all of that. So this guy's doing a similar thing, not to that scale. But the videos are just all him on the way to somewhere, and he's just looking for people that are on the roadside needing assistance. And they're like, how can I pay you? Like, dude, like insurance this, insurance that. And all that he does is he talks to them about who they are, their family, while he's sitting there like changing the tire or like doing something like roadside. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this guy. Like,
well, and that was kind of one of the stories of the sermon about saying, somebody was caught in a snowstorm and some guy stopped and shoveled her out and said, why did you stop and why didn't you do that? And he said, because somebody did that for me. And the concept was people that have been shown mercy start to show mercy.
Yeah.
We often maybe use that in the opposite, hurt people.
Yeah.
But people who receive mercy are people who genuinely show mercy.
Give mercy. And,
Yeah.
I, a handful of years ago, shout out to Isaac Leimeister. I don't know if he remembers this, but one time, neither one of us are the kind of guys that like are qualified to stop and help people like with any kind of car trouble. But we stopped, asked, somebody was on the roadside, asked like, hey, do you need any help? And triple A is like on the way. They're a couple minutes out, but we were not very far from like, I think it was like Duncan. And so we drove away, picked up a hot chocolate and a coffee because we didn't know what she would want, and then we brought back like it was a snowy situation.
Yeah,
and brought back like, hey, for your wait, like here's the coffee, and sorry, like we're
useless.
We're glad that AAA is on the way, but we are like useless. But here's a way that we can just say like we see you and we want to do something.
I totally thought you were going to say, and she wasn't there anymore, so I drank coffee.
And there you have as we're wrapping up this episode, I just want you guys listening and viewing to think about. Share with us what is a parable that has wrecked you guys. Maybe it's a parable that has been clarified in this series, or a parable in this series that's made you feel uncomfortable, or that has sparked some sort of faith growth within you. We want to hear about those. But also make some comments about what you want to see us eat. Nothing too extravagant, nothing too. This isn't
wings.
This isn't Fear Factor. Wings. Yeah.
5 in a row.
Before any of you guys were on staff, I was traditionally known as the cereal guy around staff, because people would just like walk in and it's just like, well, Billy's just got a bowl of cereal on his desk. So there
Now
might
you're
be
The little boxes.
Now you're the pizza roll guy.
Yeah. But hey, thanks for tuning in, for watching, for listening. Thanks for pulling up a seat with us, and go take the tables in your own life and invite people to your table and just talk about stories that have impacted you. So we'll see you next time.